The morning sky over Los Angeles shimmered in soft gold, the kind that makes glass and metal glow like something sacred. Inside Terminal 6, Flight 214 to New York was boarding. Passengers moved in waves, suits, tourists, families with strollers, all shepherded by smiling flight attendants in Navy uniforms. At the center of that polished calm stood Cassandra Miller, senior flight attendant for Skyline Airways, confident, striking, and known for keeping her flights flawless. Every gesture of hers had purpose. The crisp tug of her blazer, the tight knot of her scarf, the exact 2-inch heels that clicked commandingly across the cabin floor. "Morning, team," she said, stepping aboard. "Let's keep this one smooth. Full flight, VIPs in first class, and a corporate client from the board is on board. Let's make it count." Her co-attendant Leah grinned. "When do you not make it count?" Cassandra smirked. "When the passengers forget their manners." The crew laughed softly, unaware of how bitterly ironic those words would sound in a few hours. By the time first-class boarding began, Cassandra had slipped fully into performance mode. Warm smile, perfect posture, calm tone. Seat 1A was reserved for a special guest, but the manifest gave no name, just VIP internal inspection. Her curiosity lasted only a moment, until she saw him. An elderly man, late 70s maybe, with silver-white hair and a wrinkled coat that looked decades out of fashion. He moved slowly, holding a worn leather bag with shaking hands. His shoes were scuffed, and the old analog wristwatch on his arm ticked faintly as he handed over his boarding pass. "Good morning, sir," Cassandra said automatically, scanning his pass. "First class is right this way." But then her eyes flicked to the name on the ticket, Arthur Reynolds. The name meant nothing to her. She forced a polite smile. "Let me help you with your bag, sir." The man smiled kindly. "Thank you, but I've got it." His voice was low, warm, and steady, but his hands trembled slightly. Cassandra hesitated. The businessman behind him sighed impatiently, glancing at his watch. "Please, sir," she said, soft but firm. "We have a line building up." Arthur nodded apologetically and shuffled forward, clearly flustered. He dropped the bag once before finally reaching his seat. A few passengers smirked. Cassandra exhaled through her nose, silently, tightly. This is going to slow everything down. When she passed him again a few minutes later, Arthur was still struggling with his seatbelt clasp. Leah whispered as they prepared for takeoff. "Poor guy probably hasn't flown in years." Cassandra's tone was clipped. "Then he shouldn't be in first class. People pay for efficiency up here." Leah frowned. "He's just old, Cass." Cassandra looked toward 1A, where Arthur was finally settled. Old or not, he's still responsible for following instructions. She walked off before Leah could reply. An hour into the flight, breakfast service began. Cassandra moved gracefully through the aisle, balancing trays like a dancer. When she reached 1A, Arthur smiled. "Good morning, miss. Could I trouble you for black coffee? Please? 2 sugars if you have them." "Of course," she said curtly. "Would you like the continental breakfast or the omelet?" Arthur squinted at the menu. "Which would you recommend?" "The omelet," she replied. "It's faster." He chuckled. "Then let's go with that." When she returned with his tray, she noticed his napkin was already stained with spilled coffee. His hand must have slipped. She sighed, almost inaudibly. "Sir, please be careful with the cups." "There." "I'm sorry," Arthur said quickly, dabbing at the spill. "My hands aren't what they used to be." "Of course," she said, but the politeness was brittle. "I'll bring a new napkin." From the next seat, a man in a sharp suit whispered to her, "First class isn't what it used to be, huh?" Cassandra forced a tight smile, then walked back toward the galley. Leah followed her. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Cassandra replied, pulling a fresh napkin from the drawer. "I just wish people in first class acted like they belonged here." Leah hesitated. You ever think maybe he belonged here before any of us were born? Cassandra froze. What do you mean? Just, he's got that look. Not money. History. Cassandra rolled her eyes. He's got the look of someone who forgot what century it is. Leah shook her head. You never know who people are, Cass. Hours later, turbulence shook the plane briefly. Cassandra steadied herself, then glanced forward. Arthur was sitting calmly, reading a small, worn notebook. On the inside cover, she caught the faint words etched in fading ink. Reynolds Aviation, 1971. She frowned. Reynolds Aviation? Why does that sound familiar? Before she could think further, Arthur pressed his call button. Yes, sir? She said, appearing at his side. He smiled faintly. Sorry to bother you again. I was wondering if I could see the captain for just a moment after landing. She blinked, surprised. The captain? May I ask why? Arthur's tone was calm. Let's just say I helped build the wings he's flying on. Cassandra forced a polite laugh. I'm sure you did, sir. He smiled kindly, not offended, just quietly amused. You might be surprised, Miss Miller. She froze. How do you know my name? Arthur looked toward her name tag, then back at her. Because I make it a habit to know the people who keep my planes in the sky. There was something about the way he said my planes that made her chest tighten. She turned away before he could see her confusion. As she disappeared back into the galley, Arthur's reflection in the window showed a faint, knowing smile. When the plane began its descent, Cassandra went through the routine announcements, her voice smooth but distracted. Her thoughts kept circling that phrase, my planes. Couldn't be. There was no way this trembling old man in a wrinkled coat could own anything close to Skyline Airways. And yet, that name, Reynolds Aviation. She remembered seeing it engraved on the company's original logo during her corporate orientation years ago. Arthur Reynolds. Her stomach dropped. She turned slowly toward seat 1A. Arthur was quietly closing his notebook, sliding it into his bag with deliberate care. Her heart pounded. Oh no, she had mocked him, ignored him, treated him like an inconvenience. And now she realized she'd been serving the man who built the very airline that paid her salary. She tried to steady her breath as the captain's voice came over the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We'll be landing shortly. And before we do, I want to extend a special welcome to one of our most important guests on board today, Mr. Arthur Reynolds, founder of Skyline Airways. The cabin erupted in gasps and whispers. Cassandra's blood ran cold. Arthur looked up at her with kind, steady eyes and said softly, It's quite all right, Miss Miller. The sky teaches humility better than any classroom. Her throat tightened. The perfect flight attendant, the woman who prided herself on professionalism, had just learned her greatest lesson from the quietest man in the room. And the descent had only just begun. The cabin filled with an uneasy mix of whispers and curiosity. Passengers who had ignored Arthur moments ago were now sitting up straight, staring at him as if he had grown wings. A few murmured his name, recognizing it from the airline's history brochures or business magazines. Cassandra stood frozen near the galley door, her composure cracking. Her mind was spinning too fast to keep her professional smile in place. Leah came up beside her, whispering, Cass, you okay? Cassandra blinked, forcing a nod. I'm fine, but her voice wavered. No, you're not, Leah murmured. You just found out the man you snapped at owns this entire airline. Cassandra swallowed hard, her pulse hammering in her throat. He can't possibly remember what I said. Leah gave her a look. You called him inefficient. Twice. Cassandra closed her eyes, fighting the humiliation crawling up her neck. Oh God! The captain's voice returned over the intercom. Cabin crew, prepare for landing. Cassandra took a deep breath and did her final walkthrough. She passed 1A, trying to look anywhere but at Arthur. But he lifted his head and smiled softly. Seatbelt check, Miss Miller? he asked kindly. Her face burned. Yes, sir. She adjusted the belt without speaking, avoiding his gaze. Arthur glanced out the window at the thick layer of clouds below them. Beautiful, isn't it? Cassandra nodded faintly. Yes, sir. It is. He turned his head slightly toward her. Funny how the view stays the same no matter who's flying. Her breath caught. He wasn't just talking about the sky, and she knew it. As the plane touched down smoothly on the runway, the passengers applauded. The captain made one final announcement, thanking everyone for flying Skyline Airways and extending a special acknowledgement to our founder, Mr. Arthur Reynolds, for honoring us with his presence. Cassandra's chest ached. Every clap from the passengers felt like an echo of her own shame. When the seatbelt sign turned off, Arthur remained seated as others gathered their belongings. Several passengers approached him to shake his hand. One man said, "It's an honor, sir. I didn't even know you still flew commercial flights." Arthur chuckled. "I like to remember what it feels like to be human." Cassandra stood near the front, pretending to check compartments, her hands trembling. She wanted to disappear before he disembarked, but she couldn't. Not after everything. When the last of the passengers stepped off, Arthur rose slowly and walked toward her. For the first time all flight, Cassandra met his eyes fully. They weren't angry. They were kind, and that made it worse. "Mr. Reynolds," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "I owe you." He raised a gentle hand. "You owe me nothing, Miss Miller." She blinked. "But I treated you like a passenger," he said. "And that's all I wanted to be today." Her throat tightened. "I was impatient, dismissive. You deserved better." Arthur smiled faintly. "I'm old, Cassandra. I've been dismissed more times than I can count. But I've also learned that dignity isn't proven by how we're treated. It's proven by how we respond." She felt tears prick her eyes. "You're very forgiving." He chuckled softly. "Forgiveness is lighter luggage to carry." He handed her a small business card with only his name, number, and a faint gold logo embossed in the corner. "If you ever want to understand what this airline truly stands for," he said, "come to the headquarters tomorrow at noon. Ask for me." Before she could respond, he turned toward the jet bridge and walked away slowly, his leather bag slung over his shoulder. Cassandra stood frozen, staring at the card in her hand. The letters shimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights. Arthur Reynolds, Chairman Emeritus, Skyline Airways. Leah walked up beside her, eyes wide. "Did he just invite you?" Cassandra exhaled shakily. "I think he did." Leah smirked, whispering, "Girl, that's either the start of your promotion or your funeral." Cassandra managed a weak laugh, but her chest was still heavy with guilt. That night she couldn't sleep. She replayed every moment of the flight in her mind. Every word she'd said, every look she'd given him. The arrogance, the irritation, the subtle disrespect. She'd built her career on precision and control, but one small crack in her pride had turned into an earthquake. By dawn, she was dressed, uniform pressed, and standing outside Skyline Airways' downtown headquarters, an enormous glass tower that mirrored the rising sun. She walked into the marble lobby, clutching Arthur's card so tightly her knuckles turned white. At the reception desk, a young woman looked up. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Cassandra hesitated. "I'm here to see Mr. Reynolds." The receptionist blinked, straightening. "Mr. Reynolds? As in the Mr. Reynolds?" Cassandra nodded, feeling smaller with every passing second. "One moment, please." A few phone calls later, an assistant escorted her upstairs. The elevator doors opened to a quiet, elegant hallway filled with black and white photos of old aircraft and handwritten notes about the company's early years. Cassandra slowed near one of the frames. It was a faded photo of a much younger Arthur Reynolds standing beside his first prototype plane. Smiling, sleeves rolled up, eyes full of ambition. She whispered under her breath, "You built all of this." "Not alone," a voice behind her said. She turned, and there he was, Arthur Reynolds, now dressed in a tailored navy suit, looking every bit the legend he was. "Miss Miller," he greeted with a soft smile. "You came." Cassandra nodded, her throat tight. "I couldn't not." He gestured toward his office. "Come in. Let's talk about what really matters." She followed him, nerves fluttering in her stomach. The office was stunning but simple. No gold plaques or unnecessary luxury. Just shelves filled with aviation manuals, models, and photos of smiling crews through the decades. Arthur sat across from her and folded his hands. "Tell me something, Cassandra. Why did you become a flight attendant?" She blinked, caught off guard. I wanted to travel, to see the world." "Good answer," he said. "But that's what most people say." He leaned forward slightly. "The better question is, what made you stay in this job?" Cassandra hesitated. "I liked making things perfect, being in control." Arthur nodded slowly, his eyes kind but sharp. "And did you feel in control when you judged me for not fitting your image of a first-class passenger?" Her face burned. "No, sir. I felt wrong. And ashamed." He smiled faintly. "Good. That means you're learning." He gestured to a small photo on his desk. It showed a much younger version of him, sitting in coach beside a crying child, handing her a candy bar. "That was me on my first flight as a CEO," he said. "Nobody recognized me then either. But a young attendant comforted that child without hesitation. No uniforms, no titles, just kindness. That's the kind of airline I built." He looked back at Cassandra. "But somewhere along the line we lost that. Maybe you can help me bring it back." Her eyes widened. "Me? How?" Arthur smiled. "By remembering that we don't just serve passengers." The following morning, Cassandra stood on the tarmac beside the plane that would change her life again. Flight 709 to Seattle. This time, she wasn't the confident, untouchable senior attendant everyone feared. This time, she was nervous. Not because she didn't know her job. She'd done it 1,000 times. But because Arthur Reynolds would be on board, not as a secret passenger this time, but as the chairman watching her lead a crew. The sunlight glinted off the fuselage as she straightened her uniform and looked at her reflection in the glass. For the first time, she didn't adjust it for vanity. She adjusted it for purpose. Leah appeared beside her, grinning. "Back in the sky already? Didn't think you'd show up so soon after that Harvard, Idaho moment." Cassandra laughed softly. "It's a new chapter. Literally." Leah raised a brow. "So, what's the plan?" "Serve like I mean it this time," Cassandra said quietly. As they boarded, Cassandra noticed Arthur already seated in 3A, wearing a simple gray suit. No fanfare, no entourage. Just calm, watchful eyes that seemed to see everything. He gave her a small nod. "Good morning, Miss Miller." She smiled genuinely this time. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds." The flight took off smoothly, the morning sun spilling across the cabin. Everything looked ordinary to the untrained eye. Passengers sipping coffee, reading papers, scrolling through phones. But Cassandra was seeing things differently now. In 12C, a young mother was struggling to calm her toddler. In 5A, a businessman impatiently tapped his watch because the Wi-Fi was slow. In 7B, an elderly woman looked cold but too shy to ask for a blanket. Before, Cassandra might have sighed and moved on. But now she found herself pausing, really seeing them. She walked down the aisle and gently draped a blanket over the old woman's lap. "Here you go, ma'am. Let me know if you'd like some tea." The woman looked up, surprised. "Thank you, dear." Next, Cassandra crouched beside the mother. "May I?" she asked, holding out a small pack of crayons from her pocket. A trick Arthur had told her to carry. The child stopped crying almost immediately. The mother's eyes softened. "You must be a mom too." Cassandra shook her head. "No, ma'am. But I've had good teachers." As she stood, she caught Arthur's gaze from a few rows ahead. He nodded once, approvingly. An hour into the flight, turbulence hit. Sudden, rough, the kind that makes passengers grip their seats. Cassandra steadied herself and immediately switched to calm mode. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said over the intercom, her voice steady, "please fasten your seatbelts and remain seated. We'll get through this shortly." She moved down the aisle checking belts, her hand brushing against seats to keep balance. Arthur watched silently as she helped a frightened teenager breathe through her panic. When the turbulence finally cleared, scattered applause broke out. Cassandra smiled, exhaling in relief. Leah whispered as she passed, "You handled that like a pro." Cassandra smiled faintly. "Not like a pro, like a person." Arthur chuckled quietly from his seat. As the flight settled, Cassandra decided to take a risk. She poured 2 coffees, one black, one with cream, and walked to Arthur's row. "Permission to serve the chairman himself?" she teased lightly. Arthur's eyes twinkled. Permission granted. She handed him the black coffee, then hesitated. "You always drink it this way, don't you?" He raised a brow. "You remember?" She smiled. "Some lessons stick faster than others." He sipped it slowly. "Good, because I'm not here to judge you, Cassandra. I'm here to see if you've truly changed." She nodded. "I think I have, but I also know change isn't about one good flight." He leaned back, amused. "Then tell me, what is it about?" She thought for a moment. "It's about remembering that every person has a story, even if we don't read the first chapter." Arthur smiled deeply. "Beautifully said." Later that afternoon, after landing, Arthur invited Cassandra to the pilot's lounge. Not for a reprimand, but for a private conversation. "Do you know why I didn't correct you that day on the flight?" he asked, sitting across from her. Cassandra frowned. "Because you wanted to see how far I'd go?" He shook his head. "Because I wanted to see how long it would take you to see yourself." Her eyes softened. "I saw a version of me that I never want to meet again." Arthur nodded approvingly. "Good. Then you've already done more learning than most people at this company." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at a row of planes gleaming in the sunlight. "You see those?" he said. "Every plane that bears this logo carries not just passengers, but trust. You broke it for a moment that day, but now I want to see you rebuild it." She stood quietly behind him. "How?" "By teaching others what you've learned," he said, turning toward her. "I'm launching a new internal program for our flight crews, training not in procedures, but in empathy. And I want you to lead it." Her mouth fell open. "Me? After what I did?" Arthur smiled. "Exactly because of what you did. You can't teach compassion if you've never needed forgiveness." Tears filled her eyes. "Mr. Reynolds, I don't deserve that kind of trust." He walked up to her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You earn it by not wasting it. Can I count on you?" Cassandra nodded, emotion tightening her voice. "Yes, sir, you can." As she left the lounge, she looked out once more at the planes parked on the tarmac, sunlight flaring across their wings. A few weeks ago, those planes were just metal and schedules. Now, they felt like something living, something she was part of. She realized the real turbulence she'd faced wasn't in the air. It had been inside her all along. And for the first time in her career, Cassandra Miller felt like she was finally flying for the right reason. A month later, the Skyline Airways Training Center buzzed with activity. Dozens of flight attendants, ground staff, and supervisors filled the auditorium, the very heart of the airline's operations. The room, usually reserved for safety briefings and corporate meetings, now hosted something new. At the front of the stage stood Cassandra Miller, in her crisp uniform, holding a wireless mic with trembling hands. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the title, "The Open Sky Program, because every passenger deserves respect." It was Arthur Reynolds' idea, but her mission. She took a steadying breath and began, her voice clear but full of emotion. "Last month, I made a mistake that changed everything for me. she said, scanning the faces in the crowd. I judged a man by how he looked, by how he moved, by how much time he took. I thought I was serving him. But really, I was serving my pride. The room was silent. No one moved. No one whispered. That man, she continued, was our founder, Mr. Arthur Reynolds. And he didn't fire me. He didn't humiliate me. He gave me a second chance to learn what true service means. She paused, emotion tightening her throat. I realized something. Our uniforms, our titles, our schedules. None of that matters if we forget that people fly with us not just to travel, but to be treated like human beings. Arthur sat in the front row, arms folded, a small, proud smile on his face. Cassandra took a deep breath. So starting today, this program will be required for all staff. Not because we made mistakes, but because we want to remember why we're here. Not just to take people places, but to lift them up while they're with us. The applause began slowly, then grew, echoing off the walls like thunder. Arthur rose to his feet, joining in. Later that afternoon, Cassandra led her first open-sky in-flight session. A short demonstration flight filled with new attendants in training. This time, she wasn't performing. She was teaching. As the plane reached cruising altitude, she moved through the cabin, showing her team how to truly see their passengers. That woman in 5C? She whispered to one trainee. She's not being difficult, she's anxious. Ask her about her trip before offering anything. Listen first. To another, she said, don't just smile because it's your job. Smile because you mean it. The difference shows every time. Arthur walked quietly behind her, observing. When she caught his gaze, he gave her a small nod. She wasn't being tested anymore. She was living the lesson. Midway through the flight, a small commotion broke out in row 8. A sharply dressed man in his 40s was snapping at a flight attendant in training. I said sparkling water, not still. Is it really that hard to get one thing right? He barked. The trainee froze, eyes wide. Cassandra approached calmly. Good afternoon, sir, she said softly. I'm Cassandra, the training supervisor. How can we make this better for you? The man crossed his arms. By hiring people who can follow simple instructions. Cassandra smiled gently. I understand. But may I ask, is there something else bothering you today? He blinked. What? Usually anger has a reason, she said quietly. We just want to make your day a little easier if we can. The man stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. My wife's in surgery back home. I shouldn't even be on this flight. Cassandra nodded, understanding in her eyes. I'm sorry to hear that. Would you like me to see if we can get you Wi-Fi access, so you can check in with the hospital? He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I'd appreciate that. She made it happen. Within minutes, he was on a video call, relief flooding his face as he heard that his wife's surgery had gone well. When he hung up, he turned to Cassandra. Thank you. I wasn't myself. She smiled softly. It's okay, sir. We all hit turbulence sometimes. Arthur watched the entire exchange from the galley, smiling quietly to himself. Back at headquarters that evening, he found Cassandra sitting alone near the observation window, watching planes take off one by one. You handled that perfectly today, he said, stepping beside her. She smiled. I didn't fix anything. I just listened. Arthur nodded. That's exactly what fixing looks like sometimes. She turned to face him. You knew that passenger would test me, didn't you? Arthur chuckled. Let's just say I arranged the circumstances. But the choice, the heart, that was all you. Cassandra exhaled softly. It's strange. I used to think flying was about discipline and order. Now I realize it's about grace. Arthur smiled. That's the moment you stopped working for an airline and started flying for humanity. They stood in silence for a while, watching a jet rise into the orange dusk. The engines roared softly, fading into the endless sky. Cassandra said quietly, I used to want people to remember my name. Now I just want them to remember how they felt when I served them. Arthur's eyes glimmered. That's a legacy worth leaving. He handed her an envelope. The board approved this today. Inside was an embossed certificate. Cassandra Miller, Director of the Open Sky Initiative, for redefining what it means to serve with dignity. Her breath caught. Arthur, I don't know what to say. He smiled warmly. Then don't. Just keep teaching what you've already learned. That no title, no money, no uniform makes us better than anyone else. She looked down at the paper, eyes misting. You know, I used to believe the sky was just for those who could afford it. And now? Arthur asked. Now, she said softly. I know the sky belongs to everyone. Arthur smiled, looking out at the glowing horizon. That's the most beautiful thing you've said yet. As the last plane of the evening disappeared into the golden clouds, Cassandra whispered to herself, not as a flight attendant, not as a supervisor, but as a woman reborn by humility. The next morning dawned calm and golden, the kind of morning that made even the busiest airport feel alive with quiet purpose. Planes shimmered in the sunlight as crews moved briskly along the tarmac. Inside Terminal 4, Cassandra stood at Gate 32, about to board the most meaningful flight of her career. This wasn't a training run, nor a corporate showcase. It was Arthur Reynolds' final flight before his retirement. Skyline Airways had organized a ceremonial trip from Los Angeles to Boston, a symbolic route connecting the airline's two founding cities. Executives, journalists, and longtime employees filled the passenger list. And Cassandra, personally requested by Arthur, would serve as lead attendant. Her heart pounded as she looked out at the runway. One last lesson, she murmured. Leah, adjusting her uniform beside her, nudged her shoulder. You nervous? Cassandra smiled faintly. Not nervous, just grateful. Leah grinned. You? The woman who used to snap if someone's napkin was crooked? You've gone soft, Cass. Cassandra laughed. Maybe soft is stronger than I thought. As the passengers boarded, Cassandra moved with quiet confidence, greeting each person warmly, remembering names, noticing details others missed. When Arthur stepped aboard, the cabin seemed to still. He wore a simple gray suit and carried no briefcase, only a folded newspaper tucked under his arm. His presence was unspoken authority, the kind that didn't need announcement. Welcome aboard, Mr. Reynolds, Cassandra said, voice steady but warm. Seat 1A, of course. Arthur smiled. Feels fitting, doesn't it? That's where it all began. Their eyes met, both remembering that fateful flight months ago, when arrogance and kindness had traded places midair. Let's make this one perfect, Cassandra said. Arthur's smile deepened. Perfection isn't the goal anymore, Miss Miller. Humanity is. When the plane reached cruising altitude, Cassandra made the announcement herself. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to take a moment to honor someone very special on board today. A man who didn't just build an airline, but built a family in the sky, Mr. Arthur Reynolds. The cabin erupted in applause. Arthur stood, a little embarrassed, but smiling. Cassandra continued, Mr. Reynolds taught us that the true altitude of any company isn't measured in miles. It's measured in kindness. Today, as we take this final flight together, we're reminded that every journey, no matter how high it goes, begins with humility. Arthur's eyes glistened. The applause swelled again. Hours later, as the plane descended toward Boston, Arthur quietly called Cassandra over. You've done beautifully, he said. She smiled. Thank you, sir. But this is your day. Arthur shook his head gently. It's our day. You see, Cassandra, when I started this airline, I wanted to prove something, that dignity could fly as high as any jet. But I lost sight of that for a while. You brought it back. Her eyes softened. You gave me the chance. He chuckled. No, you took the chance and turned it into a legacy. He handed her a small envelope. Something for you. Inside was a single silver pin, shaped like a pair of wings. On the back, engraved words read, "The sky belongs to everyone." Tears welled in her eyes. Arthur, I can't. You can, he said quietly, because soon it'll be your turn to lead from the ground while others fly. And when you do, make sure they never forget who the sky belongs to. She nodded, voice trembling. I promise. When they landed, the entire crew gathered at the gate. Cameras flashed, executives applauded, and employees stood shoulder to shoulder. A reporter approached Arthur with a microphone. Mr. Reynolds, after 50 years of flight, what's your proudest achievement? Arthur looked toward Cassandra, who stood a few feet away, clutching the silver wings in her hand. He smiled softly. My proudest achievement? Seeing someone like her carry the torch. Cassandra Miller reminded me that an airline isn't built from steel or engines. It's built from hearts that refuse to forget where they started. The crowd applauded. Cassandra blinked back tears. Arthur turned back to her. Ready for your next chapter? She smiled through the emotion. Always. He patted her shoulder. Then the sky's in good hands. That evening, the sun sank behind the horizon as Cassandra sat alone on an observation bench overlooking the runway. One by one, planes took off, streaks of light vanishing into the darkening blue. She turned the silver wings over in her palm, the engraved words catching the glow of the setting sun. Behind her, Leah approached quietly. You okay? Cassandra smiled. Yeah, I'm just thinking. About him. About everything, Cassandra said softly. About how a man I once dismissed ended up teaching me everything that matters. Leah sat beside her. You really changed, Cass. Cassandra nodded, her eyes on the sky. No, I just remembered who I wanted to be. A plane roared overhead, soaring toward the stars. And as its lights faded into the endless dark, Cassandra whispered the words Arthur had said to her months ago, words that had become the compass of her life.